For the rest of tonight, though, we're going to visit the working group. So let's have a quick look at a couple of things. There's a couple of, this whole Richard Prebble will go into the Waitangi Tribunal. I think the more interesting point about this to do with these guys, obviously it's horrific altogether. A man who I believe when he was an MP wanted to abolish the Waitangi Tribunal has been appointed to the Waitangi Tribunal. But the more interesting point, I think, is Tama Potaka appointed him. Do you think Tama Potaka wanted to appoint him? That's the point of conversation here on the working group.
Isn't the Waitangi Tribunal already, though, a political institution? I mean, you've got Dr. Fox who's heading it up. She's got a pretty clear worldview, I think. And if you have a look at I thought it was only 20 people on the commission, but the Waitangi Tribunal has been moving into areas, I think, outside its remit under the 1975 Act. And
oh, Damian, if you think it, then it's got to be true, doesn't it?
People may disagree with me on that. But the Waitangi Tribunal does appear to be pushing quite a clear narrative. It's ruled on issues of sovereignty. It's going further than, I think, what was envisaged when it was created in 1975 of resolving treaty settlement claims. So isn't there an argument that you can make?
Doing things like working out what the principles are and still have today, even though some people think that we don't.
That the Waitangi Tribunal has already moved into the area, has already become a political institution. And I would argue that as a result of that, it's losing some of its mana and its credibility.
You can argue that, Damian, but there are two issues with it. One is that the appointment of Prebble, whatever you might think of him, what he might bring to it, it is completely different to any of the other appointments that are on that body. There are no other, long-term political biffo guys who have been appointed onto that body. Prebble is the only person who fits that particular box. And in terms of your broader critique there, it's not quite right because, of course, the tribunal does have the permissive ability.
Some of its mana and its credibility.
Goodness gracious me.
Whoopsie doodles.
Oh, it's been sitting there for so long. That's what it's gone and done, hasn't it? 29 something. So we'll go to about there and then we'll stitch together after the show.
This is the ACT Party saying we're going to...
So isn't
the tribunal does have the permissive ability to inquire into treaty issues, but it's not a determinative body. So it can make recommendations, it can come to views, but ultimately the government of the day will respond to those. How would you fix that? How would you limit it? You'd have to, by some way in statute, say you can't look at this kind of stuff, and I think that would be a dangerous path to go down. Look, the thing that's notable about this appointment is it's not, in name it's Tama Potaka's appointment, but no one seriously thinks that Tama Potaka looked at the list of possible people and chose Richard Prebble. I know how this process works. It's the Appointment and Honours Committee. This is the ACT Party saying we're going to have our guy on here and forcing Tama Potaka humiliatingly to put someone on there that I don't think Tama Potaka wanted to put on there.
Michael,
and I think that's a notable thing. And to have the ACT Party really leading policy and decision making in the semi-constitutional area of Crown Māori affairs, I think is the 7 or 8% party that's part of the government is notable and is worrying.
Well, just staying on.
There you go. I think it's a really interesting point. How the hell did Richard Prebble get on there if it wasn't for the ACT Party twisting the arm of Tama Potaka? And you might find that Tama Potaka is one of these people who you have to wait for him to leave politics before you ask him with all sincerity, what did you think about that decision? Because, yeah, it feels it's an interesting yet scary perspective, Chewy.
Yeah. Like, if they wanted to put one of their own team on the Waitangi Tribunal, they could have put Chris Finlayson on there.
Yeah.
Like, literally, I don't think anybody would have a problem with that. Like, he's Team Blue.
Unless they sort of didn't approve of what Chris Finlayson got done while he was there.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. But, like, if they were playing fair and they wanted to put one of their own guys on there, like, would anybody have a problem with him? One of the most successful treaty ministers that there's been.
Yeah.
And he's a national guy.
And he's all blue.
But he's been very, very critical of this government, of his own party's handling of Māori. And that's why he's not on there. So we get Richard fucking Prebble. Has anybody gone, Richard Prebble is definitely a learned scholar on the treaty? I don't know why Damian Grant still talks about the treaty. Like he's put in no work to try and understand it. He's just hitting the same points and just getting murdered every time he does.
Yep.
It's not his wheelhouse.
Yep. All right, let's wrap up for the night. One more clip from the working group. They're talking about welfare to. This is actually maybe we shouldn't do this clip, Chewy, because this could turn into a 6-hour-long conversation. Because this starts by talking about giving welfare to corporations around school lunches, but then of course we have to go into the conversation, thanks to the man you're looking at right now, about government shouldn't be providing lunches to children. Parents should be doing it. So let's wrap up with a lovely cheery bit of news for the week.
Well, because there was a $5.50 price difference, I think.
This is welfare to corporations.
We're buying what was $3 lunches, which was a saving of $5.50 for the taxpayer. Here's the thing, Martin, economies of scale. If you want to deliver large amounts of high quality, low price goods, you're going to need to have one large organization to do it. That's how economies of scale work. So if Seymour says, I've got so much money and I need to deliver so much product, then I've got a large corporate and it can do it. And that's going to result in what he's got, which is a $3 meal. Now, I'm not going to defend the quality of the food because I haven't tasted it. But here's the other thing. It's not the government's
Can I, just before we play this line, can you just watch how angry he gets? Like, this is real rage. When he says this, watch the face.
Because I haven't tasted it. But here's the other thing. It's not the government's job to feed your children. It's your job to feed your children. And all that Seymour is doing is adding a little bit of calories for those children. It's your job as a parent to feed your child in the morning, and it's your job as a parent to provide them lunch, and it's your job as a parent to feed them in the evening and the afternoon. And if you can't do that, if your ability to provide for your children, don't forget, the government provides the schooling for free. The cost of educating your children costs you nothing. And if you are still unable at that point to provide food for your children, who only exist as a consequence of your actions, if you can't do that, I'm not really interested in your whinging and moaning, because the food that is being provided by the taxpayer at no cost is not up to the standard that you're not even prepared to provide for your own children. So these people are not providing food for their children, criticising David Seymour for the food that he is providing. Not interested. Bomber, I can see you're just burning. You've got some sick...
Yeah, and they don't go on that. He just makes a statement and then he leaves. And Chewy, I'll give you first crack, sir.
Damian Grant doesn't understand what a society is. He doesn't believe in it. He's a libertarian that somehow hopes for some sort of Mad Max universe where we're all still very profit-driven and somehow don't murder each other in the first 5 minutes. The reason that schools are provided free by the state is because it's generally been acknowledged that that's great for society, to have an educated populace. They're better workers. They're better producers. They're better taxpayers. They don't go around murdering people for meat. And I love this whole thing of like, yes, it's a parent's responsibility to feed their children. Yep, fantastic. But what if they can't?
Or won't? Can't or won't?
What if they can't or won't? Is that the child's problem?
Mm-hmm.
Should they then starve or die and be cast aside as not being a useful profit producing member of society? Because that seems to be the position that Damian Grant wants to get really fucking angry about. He doesn't like poor people, obviously. He thinks poor people shouldn't have children, which is getting really scarily close to eugenics, another famously popular policy of libertarians. He hates poor people, but he wants to make sure that cycle continues, that no one gets out of that poverty trap. You're too hungry and deprived to go to school and learn. You continue being a poor poorly educated person on a benefit for the rest of your life, having children early, repeating that cycle again and again and again. I can tell you, Damian Grant, because I know you listen to the show, I am a childless taxpayer. I am a worker. I have zero problems with my taxes going towards feeding children that are in school to learn. I don't care whether those children are poor. I don't care if they're middle class. I don't care if they're wealthy. I believe part of the school system should be free meals because the evidence points to all students having better outcomes if they're fed. I have a big problem with corporate welfare because that's exactly what David Seymour's lunch program is now. Corporate socialist funding going to an overseas multinational that doesn't pay their taxes and has many, many complaints about the quality of their food. He has saved money and taken that taxpayer money, given it to that overseas company and taken it out of the regions and the producers around the country. The localism that we had around feeding school kids, the money was going to the regions. That's gone now. It's just gone to a big UK-based multinational that doesn't pay their taxes. That doesn't sound like, yes, it's cheaper. It doesn't sound like a good use of taxpayer money to me.
It just, for the first time today, because I listened to that today and yesterday, last night and today, and I just thought, after I heard him say that, what does Damian Grant think a government's job actually is? Because if you think that a government's job is not to feed children, then surely logic would dictate that it's not the government's job to feed anyone. So in an ideal world, it's not the government's job to provide a safety net, a welfare system. It's not the government's job to provide a pension. Because is it that different saying feed children? Because okay, it's government's job not to have any kind of safety net because, your family should be supporting you, 22-year-old, if you haven't got a job and you're on the job seeker. That should be the family's job, not the government's job. You know what I'm saying? It's like, and you said the word eugenics, and I hadn't thought about that until I listened to it now. And in my head, I was going, what's that fucking word? Gene? What is it about genes? And it did sound, I was thinking exactly the same thing for the first time, just as we heard that. And when you've got somebody who it seems has an ideology of, fuck all of you guys, if you're struggling, that's your fault, then really, what can you say about them? Because even if you went down that path of eugenics, like you shouldn't have children, man, I was married, moved to Dunedin, separated, and was destitute with children for probably a year to 18 months. So what happens to me? Like, what happens to me? No income, mortgage to pay, kids to feed. What happens to me? I was in a situation where I was feeding and clothing my kids, and then I had a separation and I wasn't able to. Well, it's not the government's job to feed those kids, my kids, that I had no income for 18 months or so. That makes completely logical sense. So I should have just been, homeless, on the road, in the car, not out of car, eating out of trash bins. Not the government's job to feed my kids. But what do you think beneficiaries do? They feed their kids on government money. The government is feeding those kids. I just, I don't know why today it kind of hit me differently, but it hit me differently today when I listened to him. It's
a completely alien worldview to me.
Yeah.
I think a government exists through the will of the people. So then one of the things that the government should do is look after the people.
Yeah.
Whether that is to the level of national defense from foreign threats, or whether it is making sure that there is a safety net. It's things like dealing with a pandemic and keeping as much of your population alive as possible. It's making sure that your society advances. It is not this all or nothing black and white world that Damian Grant has a weird semi hard on for, because it's all theoretical.
Semi?
Like it's
just semi?
Yeah, just a half chub.
Okay.
Just because, I don't know. I don't know if he's able to get enough oxygen to get to the full mast. No, never stop. You know, like these guys love to bang on about how communism has never worked in theory. So neither is libertarianism. Every time it's tried, it's failed. There's a town in North America that got overrun by bears because they tried to be libertarian. And if you have not heard that story, please look it out. It can be a bedtime story for you. It is amazing.